you're a landlord thinking about investing or perhaps just renting your own home, you may be wondering whether the rental market in the UK is coming to an end as we know it. In this video, I'm going to be sharing with you whether the rental bubble is finally coming to an end, why there's been so much rent increases in the recent years, but also how government policies may be impacting the very people it's meant to protect. And finally, whether landlords continue to exit the market. Stay tuned. So first up, let's look at what's driving landlords outside of the rental market. If you're a landlord at the moment here in the UK, it may not be much fun for you. Of course, the days are over where buy-to-let was very attractive, especially when you looked at those low mortgage rates, the property prices were low, and the legal and policies that were in place for the rental market was pretty much next to none. It was really about having that buy-to-let, getting your rent paid, and also just probably fixing a leaky tap here or there. Those days are over. We have over 170 regulations, legislation in the rental market. Mortgage rates have increased. I mean, we've seen mortgage rates where landlords were paying 2%. Now they're paying on average around about 5%. So those mortgages have increased 200, even 300%. But here is the biggest challenge that landlords are facing together with those mortgage rates, and that is when the then Chancellor George Osborne introduced Section 24. If you're not familiar with Section 24, effectively it meant that landlords could no longer allocate as an expense the mortgage interest rates. So suddenly landlords were now paying tax on their revenue, on the rental income instead of the profit. Now, with the combination of that mortgage rate being so high, this combination was deadly for a lot of landlords. And I've seen an interesting stat from Zoopla which says that monthly repayment mortgage rates are now higher or exceed average rents. And especially when we look at London, I mean, this stat says that the average mortgage rate is going to be around about £1,600 to £2,000, whilst rental is actually around about £1,500. If we look at prime London, that's going to be even higher. I mean, you're looking at mortgage rates around about £4,000 to £5,000, whilst rental average is going to be around about £3,000. So the numbers for landlords are just not stacking up. But here's the conflict. Despite these pressures, demand for rental properties continues to increase. First-time buyers are being priced out by affordability checks and also having to put more deposits. People just can't find the money if they don't have mum and dad bank, of course. Migration is also increasing. The last figures that we've seen is over 670,000. More people coming into the country means more competition because a lot of these people do rent. Some, to say, they actually do come to buy properties as well. We have a mixture of people looking to buy and rent when they come into the UK. And then finally, of course, we have house building. We're just not building enough. And that is the real challenge when it comes to the rental market or the housing market in general. Nationally, rents have risen by 6.6%, but the long-term picture it's actually more striking. Let's dive into some stats. So UK rents have risen 32% since 2020. In cities like Manchester and Glasgow, rents are up over 40% in that time. And in London, average rent is now £2,119 per month, up by 5.3% year on year. Put simply, demand is outpacing supply and rents are rising as a result. That being said, with all this rise in rent and demand, landlords are saying enough is enough. They're being squeezed by taxes, mortgages are rising, the cost of compliance, and of course we have the Renters' Rights Bill. And in addition to that, we have the looming upfront costs of upgrades from our new Ed Miliband policies, like the EPC improvements to meet energy efficiency standards. And so this might not come as a surprise that rental listings are still 20% below pre-pandemic levels, even though there's been some growth of listings in some regions. And this is probably the most telling part. Right now, 10% of properties on the market for sale are ex-rental properties. This tells you that these rental properties are not being replaced. As smaller landlords leave the private rental sector, there is a new player in town, corporate landlords. And they are private investors, they're well funded, and they are able to absorb the cost that we're shared already that smaller landlords just cannot. If we look at what Saville Stats tells us, they say that there are over 100,000 of these build to rent already completed and 50,000 in the pipeline under construction. Is this good news for tenants? Well, Hang on a little bit and you're going to find out. But first, let's answer the big question. Have we come to the end of the rental bubble in the UK? And that really depends on what you mean, because rents are still rising, but for landlords, it's becoming ever more challenging to actually make a profit. On one hand, you have those smaller landlords exiting or struggling to break even. On the other hand, you have these corporate landlords buying land, building, and renting at scale. And of course, I haven't talked about the professional landlords. So some of those smaller landlords actually become professional landlords and incorporate as well. But let's look at some other stats from Zoopla. So in London, renters now spend over 40% of their income on rent. The UK average is 28.4%, near the highest on record. And here are some key stats from Zoopla. The 4-year surge in rents for new tenancies has ended as demand cools and affordability constraints increase. And rents have grown 21% over 3 years compared to 4% for house prices. And rents are 2.8% higher over the 12 months to April 2025. That's less than half the 6.4% recorded last year and the lowest growth since July 2021. And finally, rents are on track for a 3 to 4% increase over 2025. And that affordability pressure could cool demand, or it could push those tenants into lower quality housing. And the rental market in the UK changes rapidly week by week. So make sure you subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a thing. For landlords who want to survive, it's time to think smart. Speak to a tax expert. This is by far the most painful point for a lot of landlords. Find out whether it's a good idea for you to incorporate. You may need to sell a few properties and restructure. But also make sure you get those consistent rent reviews by a professional property expert. And make sure you get a property expert to review your rent. I mean, this should be done every 6 months to a year. And ensure you also have a chat with them with regards to diversification, whether that's HMOs, short-term rentals. Your property expert is the one that's really going to support you along this way and these challenging months ahead of us. We have a great network across the UK, so if you need a recommendation, just make sure you follow the link on the description. The tenants, brace yourselves. Now, over the coming months, the Renters' Rights Bill will kick in. Now, that's overall pretty much good news for tenants, but there is one that I keep on talking about that's going to impact the rental market, which is the end of the so-called rental bidding wars. Now, what is that an issue for tenants? Well, initially, now landlords, because they can't get a penny more than the advertised price, what are they going to do? They're going to overprice their rental property. We expect rental properties to actually increase in the coming months. At some point, they will slow down, but that's a slowdown. It's unlikely to actually come down. You can also expect in the medium term, less properties and more competition. As those build to rents start to complete, there will be choice. But I don't think that's going to be over the medium term, it's more on the long term. But do expect these build to rent properties at a premium. So the rental market in the UK isn't collapsing. It is going through a huge transformation. And that means that those smaller landlords, accidental landlords, no longer want to stay in the industry. We are starting to see, of course, those smaller landlords perhaps becoming more medium professional sized landlords and scaling up. And then, of course, higher rents, more corporate landlords, and tighter margins overall, at least for the short-term period until those mortgage rates start to slowly to come down. So if you're a landlord, adapt or risk being left behind. And if you're a tenant, keep an eye on the evolving Renters' Rights Bill, because it's not all good news for tenants. There's always going to be an impact, as we've seen in recent years with government intervention. And if you really want to find out about the Renters' Rights Bill changes, make sure you watch my next video, also on the description.